Recently, I had a conversation with my wife of 11 years, and it ended with her in tears. It was a stark reminder of a similar incident from 3 years ago when I was on the brink of losing my job. Back then, my wife Liza, whose full name is Elizabeth, was so distraught at the thought of me missing our anniversary that she insisted I come home immediately. Fast forward to now, and it's her who's going to miss our anniversary. I didn't try to change her mind this time. Even so, these past 12 years have been the happiest of my life. When I first met Liza, she was 24 and just beginning her career in sales. She came to our architectural firm, trying to convince us to advertise in upscale magazines that we couldn't afford back then. Among the crowd, I was struck by her captivating presence and black hair. After a chat with my business partner, he helped me get her attention long enough to ask her out. During our first meeting, she admitted she knew we couldn't pay for her services, but despite that, I fell deeply for her. Our relationship grew over 6 months, and she eventually moved in with me for another 6 as she transitioned from a nomadic life to a stable office job. 4 months later, we were married. I still feel incredibly lucky every day for convincing her to marry me. In a rush, I dialed my boss Craig's number once again. I've been with the company since its inception. When Craig first started it, our small team of 4 designers achieved significant success by cutting down production times across various projects. "Craig, I know you're there. Pick up," I pleaded into the phone. Eventually, his voice came through. "James, I'm swamped right now, he responded curtly. Keeping it brief, I said, "I'm leaving now and won't be back until Monday." He replied, "Leaving? Where are you off to?" I answered, "I'm heading off to celebrate my anniversary with my wife. I'll be back Monday. Have a good trip. Remember to knock before you come in," he joked. I laughed and said, "You always manage to make me laugh." He retorted, "I hear that a lot. Not from people who really know you, though." Apologetically, I said sorry. But ever since they brought in that new guy to run Liza's department, there's been tension at home. Maybe a hotel break will help ease things. "Well, it won't hurt. Just do me a favor. When you're off on your adventures, think of me," Craig grinned. "Deal. See you Monday," I responded. I didn't hang up right away, but asked Craig's secretary, Laura, for a favor. She was skilled at sorting things out, and I needed a plane ticket. After a quick chat with her, I headed home to pack. While packing my suitcase, the phone rang suddenly. "You've got 45 minutes to get to the airport for security. The ticket's waiting for you at the counter in your name," Laura informed me. She had arranged a return flight for Sunday afternoon at 1:30 p.m. Unfortunately, Liza's hotel was fully booked, so she secured a room 2 blocks away. "Safe travels. See you Monday," Laura said. I rushed to grab my shaving kit from the bathroom, packed it hastily, and did a quick sweep of the room, including turning off the coffee maker, a rare move for me, before hurrying to the car. Over the years, I've found several shortcuts to speed up my trips. Despite my fast driving, I reached the flight with plenty of time. After check-in, security, and boarding, I finally settled into my seat on the plane. I put on my headphones and played some music. As a nervous flyer, music helps me relax and stay calm. 3 hours into the flight, I was jolted awake from a pleasant dream about Liza by a gentle tap on my shoulder. Falling asleep was no surprise given my recent lack of rest, partly due to work stress. Liza and I had been having a rough patch for months. For over 2 months, she had kept her distance, avoiding any closeness. It started when she mentioned a colleague from another department getting promoted and taking over her position. She was determined to prove that this was a mistake and worked hard to outshine Mr. Kevin Smith. For the first couple of weeks, she came home utterly exhausted, obsessing over strategies to surpass him. But her initial drive faded, and a few weeks later, she mentioned they had started cooperating. I grew increasingly anxious as their joint effort to land a major client approached, with thoughts of a possible romantic connection between them creeping into my mind, though Liza always reassured me. As I retrieved my bag from the overhead compartment, I pondered how to discreetly invite Liza to dinner without spoiling the surprise. After taking a taxi to my hotel, I struck up a casual conversation with the driver, who told me about a charming, dimly lit restaurant situated between our 2 hotels. The taxi driver had casually mentioned a charming, dimly lit restaurant situated between our two hotels. The description intrigued me, as it was exactly what I had in mind. After checking into my hotel, I took a quick shower and hurriedly got ready. I was eager to find Liza before she left for dinner. Glancing at the lobby clock, I saw it was nearly 5:30. Observing the lively street outside, I decided a walk to the restaurant would be pleasant, following the directions provided by the receptionist. The walk turned out to be quite easy, and I made a mental note of the quaint restaurant the driver had mentioned, which was conveniently just a short distance from her hotel. I tipped the driver generously before heading into the hotel lobby. By 5:50, I arrived at Liza's hotel and approached the reception desk, where a woman greeted me with a smile. "Hello," I said warmly. "I'm James Wilson. Could you please check if my wife, Elizabeth Wilson, is in her room? I'd really like to talk to her if she's available." The receptionist repeated the name for confirmation and checked her records. "Yes, she's registered here. Let me see if she's in her room right now." She dialed the room number and, after a moment, turned back to me with an apologetic expression. "I'm sorry, but there was no answer. Would you like to leave a message?" I responded, trying to mask my disappointment. "Not at this time. I was hoping to surprise her since our anniversary is tomorrow. I'd really appreciate it if you could keep this conversation to yourself." She nodded reassuringly. "No problem, sir. I won't mention it. I wish you a wonderful day tomorrow." "Thank you. I'm off to a restaurant now. Maybe luck will be on my side," I said, giving her a polite farewell before heading out. As I reached the far end of the lobby, I noticed a noisy hall bustling with activity. People working, serving, sitting, and eating. The place was packed, and I knew my chances of spotting Liza in such a crowd were slim. I spotted a restroom near the back wall and took care of business, then resumed my search. From the corridor entrance, I scanned the room again. Despite my thorough search, she remained nowhere in sight. I finally decided to sit in one of the padded chairs with a high backrest, trying to keep a clear view of the area. Just then, I heard a faint laugh that sounded like Liza's. My heart skipped a beat as I began to scan the area more intensely. Large booths blocked my view, allowing only partial glimpses of the faces of those seated. Reluctant to approach any table prematurely, I retraced my steps and carefully walked along the row of tables. When I reached the third table from the corridor, my heart sank as I saw her. Liza was sitting there, engrossed in conversation with a man I didn't recognize. She looked radiant in her elegant evening dress, her demeanor relaxed and at ease with him. Their interaction seemed far more intimate than a typical dinner with a colleague. My heart raced as I watched him lean in closer. Instinctively, I grasped the doorframe for support. As she leaned forward, their lips met in a soft, tender kiss. Overcome with a mix of emotions, I made the decision to leave the doorway and move to the center of the hall. I sank into one of the plush chairs with a high back, trying to keep my composure while my eyes remained fixed on their table. Suddenly, Liza's laughter rang out again, drawing my attention. I turned my head and saw her walking beside him, holding his hand with both of hers. Their closeness was undeniable, and their shared merriment only heightened my curiosity. They passed by me, just 15 feet away, and even though they were chatting, my focus was entirely on the adoring expression she wore as she looked at him. It had been ages since I had seen her with such a loving gaze. My breath caught in my throat, and I felt a wave of speechlessness wash over me. Determined to confront the reality, I headed for the exit. My expression likely revealed my distress as I walked briskly outside. I couldn't tear my eyes away from them as they strolled down the street, her arm linked with his. They eventually turned a corner and disappeared into the restaurant I had seen earlier. Snapping out of my trance, I hurried to the restaurant's entrance, but realizing I needed to give them space, I slowed down to avoid drawing attention. I paused for a few moments, taking deep breaths to steady myself. The expressions on their faces spoke volumes, but I needed more clarity, even though I couldn't fully grasp it. Summoning my resolve, I pushed open the door and cautiously stepped inside, keeping close to the wall as the entrance was unattended. I stood there patiently, allowing my eyes to adjust to the dimly lit surroundings. As the room came into focus, I finally spotted them. They were seated at a small table for two at the far end of the restaurant. I made my way over, carefully moving along the walls for support. Once I reached a small table nearby, I sat down, and almost immediately, the waitress appeared behind me. "What can I get for you, dear?" she asked with a warm, welcoming tone. I replied, "Double scotch on the rocks, please." As I waited for my drink, I could overhear their conversation. The man spoke in a low voice. "Our meeting tomorrow isn't until 10 o'clock, so we have plenty of time to celebrate tonight." Liza responded, "I'm glad you didn't let him manipulate you into going home. We wouldn't miss our 2-month anniversary for anything." "I can't believe it's been 2 months already," she added with a hint of wonder. "It could have been longer," he said, "if only you had accepted my offer at the end of my first week at work." Liza laughed softly. "I had to play the innocent girl with you, considering I'm supposedly married." She shook her head, recalling how he had approached her in front of Susan and asked her out, fully aware of her marital status. "Susan actually told me you liked me," he mentioned. "We should do something nice for her, since she played a significant role in bringing us together," Liza suggested. Just then, the waitress arrived, setting their drinks down before swiftly walking away. They raised their glasses in a toast. "To the incredible 2 months we've spent together, and to many more to come," he said as their glasses clinked together. "I'll do whatever it takes," he promised. "There will be many more," Liza replied cheerfully. The waitress then placed my scotch in front of me and asked, "Here you go, dear. Is that all for now?" I handed her a $10 bill and said, "Thank you, ma'am." I then shifted my focus back to the table next to me. They glanced up briefly, but my presence seemed insignificant to them. Liza, noticing his gaze, turned to look at me. I remarked, "You know, a guy should always carry a camera for moments like this." Her expression was one of limitless emotion, ideal for various posters. As she sat there, her lips moved soundlessly, and I thought to myself, wow, 2 months. This is quite an anniversary. I still remember mine, but after 11 years, it starts to lose its novelty. Watching them, I found myself reflecting on their celebration. "Let's celebrate 2 months," I said aloud. "It's a symbol of passion and prosperity, isn't it? A lovely couple like you definitely deserves a gift." With that, I tossed a ring in Liza's direction, adding, "And here's a surprise." Kevin, realizing the situation was getting tense, interrupted Liza with a loud outburst. I turned to Liza, who was trying to calm him down, and said, "Tell him how lucky he is that he wasn't in my home. Please contact me to let me know where you'd like to collect your belongings. If you're wise, you'll avoid coming to my house. Applying ice to your nose might help with the discomfort." With that, I turned on my heel and walked away. Leaving the club, I made my way briskly back to the hotel. It was unlikely that Liza knew my current address, and given my recent actions towards her friend, it seemed unlikely she would pursue me. To distance myself quickly, I rushed into the lobby. At the front desk, I asked, "Excuse me, do you have contact numbers for airlines? I need to book a plane ticket urgently." The employee replied, "Certainly, sir. May I ask which airline you prefer, and your desired departure time and destination?" After providing the necessary details, she assured me she would inform me of the flight details in my room. Back in my hotel room, I began pacing restlessly, bewildered by the evening's events. How could this have happened? Then it struck me, maybe Liza had missed her true calling in life. Her performance tonight seemed almost theatrical. As my frustration mounted, I realized I couldn't stay in the room any longer. Grabbing my bag hastily, I descended the stairs to the lobby. When I reached the lobby, the receptionist, who had just finished a phone call, motioned for me to approach. "Sir, if you leave now, you might make the last flight of the day. Registration closes in 30 minutes. If you miss it, the next flight is in 3 hours," she informed me. "Thanks," I replied, hopeful. I signed the cash receipt handed to me by a woman at the desk. "I'm sorry I have to cut my visit short. Please stay with us next time," she said with a warm smile. As I headed for the exit, a wave of unforgettable memories flooded over me. I rushed out of the lobby and quickly grabbed a taxi from the nearby parking lot. "I'll bet you $50 you can get me to the airport in under 30 minutes, I said as I settled into the seat. The taxi driver responded confidently, "You got it, boss." He turned out to be quite experienced and got me to my destination in just 20 minutes. I paid the meter fare, added a generous $1.50 tip, expressed my gratitude, and hurried inside the terminal. Reflecting on the evening later, I realized that the worry I felt was unnecessary. After passing through security, I had a few minutes to spare before boarding was announced. Unlike last time, when I needed music to keep my mind occupied, I found myself surrounded by distractions this time. As I waited, a funny thought crossed my mind, and I had to stifle a laugh. I remembered how Liza's mother had never really liked me, while Jessica seemed to have her husband, Brian, under her thumb. She treated Brian poorly, almost as if he were invisible. I couldn't stand her behavior, and she knew it. There was even a day when she accused me of cheating on Liza, claiming she saw me looking at other women when we were together. Throughout the flight, doubts about what I had witnessed gnawed at me. I pulled out the photo I always carried with me, a picture of Liza and me, and studied it intently. The man next to Liza in the photo suddenly seemed unfamiliar. I glanced around to make sure no one was watching me, and then turned my attention back to the picture. In it, I was standing beside Liza, but the way she gazed into his eyes troubled me. It made me question everything. Although men aren't typically known for their memory, I like to think I was an exception. Like many women, Liza often tested my memory with questions like, "Do you remember this?" or "Do you remember that?" Unfortunately for her, I remembered everything. I recalled every conversation, every plan we made, and all the secrets we whispered in the dark. Sitting there now, I couldn't help but wonder if I had been oblivious to this developing situation for 2 months. What else had I missed? The man had shown interest in her from the very first week they met, but Liza insisted she had rejected his advances to maintain her appearance due to her marriage. The thought of them being together bothered me deeply. I formulated a 2-part plan. First, I would go home, pack all her belongings, and take them to her mother's house. I knew the elderly woman would likely find a way to blame me, but I was more interested in uncovering the truth. As I arrived at the airport, the unraveling of my family life felt like a heavy burden. I headed straight to my car and joined the exit queue. The drive home was a blur, and I barely remembered the journey. Regardless, I made it to my destination. The exact duration of the drive remained a mystery, but at that moment, it didn't really matter. Entering the dimly lit house, I was struck by an eerie sense of unfamiliarity. The thought that this might become my new normal consumed me. After dropping my bag, I headed to the kitchen and instinctively turned on the answering machine. A pleading voice crackled through the speaker. "James, please don't do anything rash. I'm heading home to talk. Please wait until I get here." Her voice sounded pained, filled with emotion. I believed she deserved to face the consequences of her actions, but I wasn't ready to listen to her excuses, especially not in that voice. Reacting impulsively, I banged my fist against the wall. My actions might have been hasty, but I needed to protect myself from making any foolish decisions. It was clear I wouldn't be able to sleep that night. I went to the garage and gathered all the suitcases she had accumulated over the years. Choosing a large black suitcase and a smaller bag for her clothes, I set them aside and took the rest to the bedroom. As I sifted through her closet, I carefully selected a few items and stuffed them into one of the large bags, repeating the process several times. I turned my attention to the dresser, where I discovered underwear tucked away. For a fleeting moment, the thought of grabbing some hot dogs crossed my mind. I was supposed to head to her mother's house, but I didn't want to deal with her parents or anyone else. So, I decided to have a solitary gathering with lox and marshmallows instead. I grabbed the essentials and made a quick stop at the hardware store to pick up some fresh lox. Upon returning home, I realized I couldn't just leave the pile of belongings in the front room. Following my instincts, I loaded everything into the car and headed to her mom's house. Driving carefully, I unloaded everything near the garage, not wanting to add to Brian's workload, especially since his wife and daughter wouldn't help him. As the third box hit the ground, my mother-in-law appeared. "Hi, James, what's all this? What's going on?" she asked, her confusion evident. I explained, "Well, when Liza arrives, she might need her clothes. I thought she'd bring them herself, but I couldn't wait any longer." They were cluttering the front room. With a pale face, she asked, "What do you mean, when Liza arrives?" I thought she wasn't in town yet. Why would her things be here? Jessica, I'm not entirely sure how she plans to sort things out, I said, but I assume she might stay with you temporarily. She might be considering moving in with the person she's been spending time with, but I can't say for certain. That's why I brought her things. Seeing her face grow even paler, she responded. What are you implying? How can you accuse my daughter of such things? She had to stay there for work. Liza would never cheat on you. Jessica's voice quivered, edging toward hysteria. I saw them together just last week. They were at a nightclub near their hotel, celebrating their 2-month anniversary with such joy. I asked her repeatedly to come home for our anniversary, but she said she couldn't. Determined, I boarded a plane to be with her. Yet, when I arrived, I stumbled upon them in the middle of an intimate dinner. The atmosphere was so romantic that I felt like an intruder. I watched them share tender kisses across the table, and my mind raced with thoughts I couldn't fully grasp. When they walked past me in the hotel lobby, I was on the verge of confronting them, but hesitated. She leaned in to whisper something in his ear, and the sight made me reconsider interrupting their moment. I needed air, so I stepped outside to clear my head. To my shock, they left and headed to a nearby nightclub. I found a spot at a table close by and overheard her saying she didn't want to leave him on their 2-month anniversary. He corrected her, saying it was actually their 3rd month. It became painfully clear that if I wanted to make sense of this, I had to act. I tried to stay hidden, but knew I needed concrete proof. After 10 years of abstaining from alcohol, I took my first drink. It had been a decade since Liza had worried about my drinking, believing it could threaten our marriage. In response to her concerns, I had given her my wedding ring, thinking it would be a fitting gesture. Now, I preferred his gift over mine. As I waited for her return and the inevitable confrontation, I anticipated that she might seek refuge at my doorstep for a while. I said this to unsettle her. You're lying. How can you accuse your wife of such things, especially after 11 years together? She's confided in me. She's troubled, but I won't refer to her as my wife again. You may feel obligated to support her because she's your daughter, but I have no such duty. I've witnessed everything firsthand. For the past 2 months, I've been alone while she's been with him since he joined this company. It's astounding how she's changed, given the upbringing you provided. She looked me in the eye every day for 3 months, lying without a shred of remorse. If you think I'll let her back into my home, then you're more naive than she is. It's your choice what to believe, but I've chosen to cut my losses. She clearly has strong feelings for this man, and he's welcome to have her. She won't need to keep up any pretense. As soon as she's finished with her charade, I'll direct her to you. You can see for yourself who's being dishonest. I instructed her sharply. If she calls, make sure you pass on the message exactly as I've said. Let her know I'm eager to see how she handles this. With those words, I left her house and drove away, feeling restless and agitated. I spent hours wandering around my own house before finding a small corner in the garage to set up an impromptu workspace. The sound of the doorbell jolted me from my thoughts. Curiosity got the better of me, and I approached the door cautiously. When I opened it, Liza was standing there. Realizing I was in the garage, she remarked, "You must have been in here. I tried knocking, but you didn't hear me." "I was just tidying up," I said, trying to sound nonchalant as I surveyed the disorganized room. Liza sighed deeply. "Well, Mom called me. It seems you've already made up your mind about what to do with me." She looked at me with a mixture of sadness and resignation. "What did you expect? That I wouldn't care about your affair?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. Liza hesitated before responding. "I guess I wasn't thinking clearly. I was overwhelmed by everything. It's a shame," I admitted, "because all I've done is think. You see, there was no one around to distract me from my thoughts. I missed having someone to share dinners with, to visit clubs, to whisper and kiss in the dark. Instead, I was left with someone who could deceive me so easily, looking me straight in the eye. Someone who could share my life and then be intimate with another. Is this really how you want to end 11 years of our life together?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I replied, "Did you even consider asking me about it, James? Would it have mattered to you if I had a real relationship with someone else rather than just playing games?" I thought such an important question would weigh heavily on me. But now, it seems it doesn't matter anymore, does it? Now you and the person whose name I can barely remember can move on without any more struggles over deciding whom to spend our anniversary with, I said, sinking into a chair with a weary sigh. Liza looked at me, trying to maintain her composure. I think I understand your perspective, she began tentatively. Do you truly understand, Liza? I replied, voice laced with skepticism. Because I genuinely doubt that you do. For you, it might just be a case of infidelity, something you've managed to justify or even shift the blame onto me. Could that be it, Liza? Maybe my actions drove you to be with someone else? Liza lowered her gaze, her shoulders slumping. No, I don't blame you for this. It just happened. Just happened? I echoed, incredulous. Having an affair with someone other than a spouse for 2 months isn't a simple accident. It requires effort and secrecy. To maintain an affair demands continuous effort. And let me tell you, you and your lover have played your roles remarkably well. I've fallen completely in love with the idea that you both managed to find time for your little game. Liza's face was flushed with a mix of shame and defiance. I can't believe you're making this sound so theatrical. The tearful phone call I made last night? It was genuine. Maybe you should consider a new career in drama, because you clearly excel at it. I couldn't help but laugh bitterly. A brief moment of uncontrollable laughter, I admit. It was an unintended outburst. But if this is how you handle someone you love, spare me your pretense. How can you claim you love me after all this? She looked hurt and confused. How can you doubt that I love you after 11 years? She protested. Listen, Liza, I said, leaning forward, since you seem to enjoy questioning things. Let me ask you this. Given your deep introspection, imagine if I had discovered you were involved with another man, but it was just a one-time thing, not an ongoing affair. How do you think I would have reacted? Liza's eyes softened, and she answered in a subdued tone. Honestly, I think I would have asked you to leave and started divorce proceedings. I nodded, acknowledging her honesty. I expected such a reaction. I even imagined you might have thrown something at me. But who knows? I mused aloud, my voice trailing off. Liza gave a faint, resigned smile. Perhaps. Now, imagine that for nearly 3 months, every day we spent together meant nothing to me. It was all just a facade to deceive you into thinking our relationship was thriving. In reality, my heart was with someone else, spending entire days with my mistress after leaving you. Do you honestly believe I love you after nearly 13 years? Show me some confidence, Liza. Her expression was a mix of confusion and hurt. It's as if you're suggesting I don't care about what happened. The time we spent together was valuable to me. It wasn't just casual conversation. I genuinely enjoyed being with you. Do you remember the last time we were close, Liza? I asked, my tone sharp. When was the last time you initiated one of our affectionate kisses? When did you last act like my wife? After everything I've witnessed and heard, it's hard to believe you're standing here, claiming to love me. I'm not naive. I overheard you discussing him with that gossip, Susan, as soon as he arrived at the office. And then you both came up with the idea of giving her a gift for bringing you two together. It seems you've already found your next bridesmaid. All that's left is to find his best man, and the wedding banquet will be set. Liza's eyes widened, and she tried to compose herself. So, it turns out you're just like me. Should I expect a server to deliver divorce papers to my doorstep? First and foremost, I said firmly, I need to know where you're going to live. There won't be a process server waiting to hand you divorce papers. I've reserved that privilege for myself. The case is closed. Escape from Liza and move forward. If you happen to see me with someone else, please don't try to intervene. What are you trying to prove with this? Liza asked, frustration evident in her voice. I probably didn't think I needed to prove anything to you, I replied. What I did for myself, not for you. Why would I fight for a man like you? Those who respected me so little, thinking I'd tolerate or make excuses for the way you treated me. When I gave you the ring, it was a clear sign that things were over. I don't want to invest my energy in something that no longer matters to either of us. I can't forget or forgive. Based on your past and present behavior, it's evident that I'm not a priority for you. So it's time for me to leave you, Liza, and move on. I don't pretend to understand how you expected everything to end, but you certainly ruined it. Liza looked at me with a mix of resignation and bitterness. So, you're kicking me out and keeping everything for yourself? After 11 years, it seems unfair. It always comes down to a deal, doesn't it? I said coldly. Well, that's settled. If you need a house, you'll have to pay for it. As for me, I want to keep the house. As Liza's eyes filled with tears, I added, and now it's your turn to sleep at his place. She gave a final, disheartened look before turning away. The house felt emptier than ever as I locked eyes with her one last time, sealing the finality of our decision. I've fallen in love with him, Liza said, her voice carrying a mix of defiance and vulnerability. Now that I have some space, I can finally turn this house into something I've always wanted. I assumed you and Bast had already found a place, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady despite the emotional weight of the conversation. His name is Kevin, Liza corrected, her irritation barely contained. Honestly, I couldn't care less about what his name is, I said, my frustration seeping through. Do you think he doesn't have a place to stay? Well, of course he does, Liza responded with a touch of defensiveness. In that case, problem solved, I said, a hint of sarcasm in my tone. Liza's expression grew tense. So, are you sure his wife will be okay with this arrangement? Liza looked at me, a mixture of surprise and unease crossing her face. How did you know about his wife? I'm not naive, Liza, I said. Why else would you be here, if not to discuss the complexities of your new relationship? So what's the deal? I pressed. He's not planning to leave his wife for you? Liza's demeanor shifted from defiant to contemplative, revealing the weight of her decision. I thought about it deeply. Our relationship lasted 11 years, but it's clear that's over now. I came to that realization when I handed you the ring, remember? Don't try to use our past as a bargaining chip. It's finished. Liza's gaze fell on the stack of papers before her. I'll sign these documents to finalize everything. You can have the house if you want it. I've accepted that we're done. Don't expect me to come crawling back or to regret my decision. I'm moving on, just as you are. As she reached in her pocket and pulled out the wedding ring, she handed it to me with a mixture of detachment and resolve. What should I do with this? She asked. Do whatever you want, I said. If you want to pawn it, go ahead. It won't fetch much, but it's yours to deal with. Liza seemed indifferent. I might just do that. Extra money could be useful right now. Well, don't expect a fortune, I said. They usually buy these things by weight, and you probably won't get more than $1 or $2. It's not worth much, but it's your call. I turned towards the door, signaling the end of our discussion. Did you manage to get all your things out of the closet? She asked. Yes, though I didn't pack them very neatly, I replied. I'll call you in a few days. I hope your clothes are still in good shape after the trip. Liza took a moment to check the room. I heard her rummaging in the bedroom, then in the closet, and finally in the bathroom. When she returned downstairs, she was hastily packing her cosmetics into a floral zip-up bag. You were thorough. You only missed a few things, she said with a strained smile. I might need to call you when it's time to move. Of course, I replied. I'd be happy to help as long as it's not too close to me. Liza suggested we go for a walk, but I hesitated before saying, wouldn't it be too much to ask you to run around instead? Kiss me on the spot, Liza said, her tone sharp as she turned to leave. I wouldn't dare kiss someone who's been with someone else, I retorted, closing the door behind her. That marked the end of our communication. The finality of the moment was palpable. 3 months later, my lawyer had all the divorce documents prepared, instructing me to pick them up on Monday. I planned 2 essential stops. First, to retrieve the documents from the lawyer's office, and then to visit my mother-in-law's house to obtain Liza's signature. After parking outside her house, I took a deep breath, reflecting on the gravity of the situation. This was the final step in closing a significant chapter of my life. As I approached the front door and rang the bell, I was met by my mother-in-law. Her surprised expression mirrored the complexity of my emotions. Well, James, what brings you here? She asked. I thought you'd forgotten about us. Not quite, I replied. Is Liza here? Yes, she's here. Come on in. she said, ushering me inside. A few moments later, Liza entered the room. Her demeanor was composed, but I could sense the underlying tension. "I'm here for you to sign these papers," I said, handing her the divorce documents. "I want this process to be over. Once you sign, I'll file them tomorrow." Liza sighed deeply. "I don't think I've ever been good enough for you," she said, her voice tinged with sadness and resignation. "Do you think I'm just going to stand by and ignore everything that's happened?" she continued, her eyes searching mine for a response. Liza briefly left the room, returning with a pen. As she signed the papers, each stroke seemed to underscore the finality of our separation. I watched her carefully, noting the swift and deliberate nature of her actions. When she finished, she placed the pen on the table with a certain finality and gathered the documents into a manila envelope. "You're free now," she said, her tone neutral. "Thank you for coming here. Take care of yourself." She turned her attention to her mother, adding, "Mom, you can come in now. Congratulations to you as well." I nodded, acknowledging the formality of the moment before making my exit. As I drove away from the house, a complex array of emotions washed over me. The end of our relationship was now official, and I couldn't shake the feeling that life was poised to shift in ways I hadn't fully anticipated. The finality of our divorce marked the beginning of a new chapter, one that promised to be both challenging and transformative. In the weeks that followed, I received unexpected news from Liza's father. He informed me that, after our divorce, Liza had asked Kevin to leave his wife and marry her. However, Kevin made it clear that he couldn't commit to such a step. He confessed that his feelings for Liza were not romantic. This revelation forced Liza to confront a harsh new reality, a future without both me and Kevin. She was now left to navigate the aftermath of her choices and learn from the lessons of our past relationship. Liza now resides with her parents, having been dismissed from her previous job under less than ideal circumstances. Her father relayed that Liza's attempts to rebuild her life have been fraught with difficulties. She has struggled to find stable employment and has encountered several disappointing relationships, involving either married men seeking only intimacy or men with dubious reputations. Her indiscriminate pursuits eventually led to a psychiatric illness, for which she is now undergoing therapy. The struggles and challenges she faces are a stark reminder of the complexities and consequences of the choices we make.